6 hours of dreamy fairy tales, gentle stories to help you sleep. The first thing Mara noticed when she woke was the silence. Not the gentle hush of early morning, but a heavy, unnatural stillness, like the world itself had stopped breathing. Her fingers clutched the edge of her threadbare blanket, pulling it up to her chin. She strained to hear the usual sounds, the rustle of her mother's skirts in the kitchen, the thump of their old dog's tail against the wooden floor. But there was nothing. Just silence, and that cold, gnawing feeling inside her chest that today would not be kind. Mara stumbled from her bed, feet numb against the cracked floorboards. When she reached the kitchen, she found it empty. Only the old clock on the wall ticked steadily, the hands frozen at 3:13. Her heart dropped. The clock never stopped. It was one of the few things her father had left behind before vanishing into the woods 8 years ago. Her mother was gone, too. The fire was dead. The basket of laundry she was supposed to mend lay untouched by the door. And on the worn kitchen table, where her mother always left a note when she went to town, there was only a smear of something dark, not ink. Blood. Mara's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair with a crash that sounded deafening in the oppressive quiet. Panic rose in her like a tide. She sprinted outside, barefoot and wild-eyed, but the clearing around their tiny shack was empty, just brittle grass and gray mist curling at the edges of the woods. "Mama," she screamed. Her voice tore through the silence, echoing back to her, thin and hollow. No answer. Mara wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the tears burning her eyes. They couldn't afford another disaster. Every day was already a battle for scraps, foraging in the woods, bartering with cruel neighbors, patching up their little home with hope and prayers. And now, her mother, her only anchor, was gone. She sank to the ground, trembling. A low whistle cut through the air. Mara jumped up, her heart hammering. But then she saw him, Joren, her oldest and only friend, weaving through the mist with a bundle of firewood slung over one shoulder. His red scarf, a bright streak against the gray, marked him like a flame in the gloom. "Mara," he called, frowning as he jogged closer. "What's wrong?" She choked out the story, her voice shaking. Joren's face grew pale as he listened. "Are you sure she didn't just—" He stopped himself. They both knew her mother wouldn't leave without a word. Not after everything. Not after the long winters they had survived together, huddled close against hunger and grief. Joren dropped the firewood and put a steady hand on her shoulder. "We'll find her. I promise." Mara nodded stiffly, trusting him more than she trusted herself in that moment. They started with the woods. It was a place of whispered warnings and half-told tales, a place children were taught to fear. People spoke of strange creatures there, women with faces that changed in the moonlight, voices that lured you deeper until you were never seen again. But Mara had grown up near these woods. She knew their moods, when the trees sighed in the wind, when the birds grew restless. Today, the forest was wrong. The mist thickened around them, dampening sound, swallowing their footsteps. Trees loomed overhead like skeletal arms. Strange markings, deep and jagged, scored the trunks as claw marks, almost, or something worse. Once, Mara thought she glimpsed a shadow darting between the trees, but when she looked again, there was nothing. They found the first sign at the old well, a scrap of her mother's shawl, caught on a thorn bush. It was stained, torn. Mara clutched it to her chest, the scent of her mother, herbs and wood smoke, still clinging faintly to the fabric. "We're close," Joren said grimly. But his hand kept drifting toward the knife on his belt. As they pressed on, Mara began to feel it, a presence. Watching. Following. When she paused to catch her breath, she could hear something breathing, not Joren, not herself, but something else, just beyond the mist. Every hair on her body stood on end. "Joren," she whispered, barely daring to move her lips. "Something's here." He nodded tightly. He had felt it too. Suddenly, a noise, a snap, like a twig breaking, made them spin around. At the edge of the path, half hidden in the fog, stood a figure. Tall. Still. Its face was obscured by shadows, but Mara could see the glint of something sharp, a hook, swinging lazily from where its hand should have been. Joren stepped in front of her instinctively, pulling his knife free. "Stay behind me," he hissed. The figure took one step forward. The mist seemed to coil around its feet as it moved. Mara's knees buckled with terror, but she forced herself to really look. And what she saw made her blood run cold. The thing's feet didn't touch the ground. It hovered. And when it opened its mouth, a deep, gurgling sound spilled out, not a voice, but something like a drowning man gasping for air. "Run!" Joren shouted. He grabbed her hand, and together they tore through the trees, branches clawing at their skin. Mara didn't dare look back, but she could hear it, the heavy, wet scraping of the hook against tree bark, following them, closer and closer. When they burst into a small clearing, they stopped, gasping for breath. And then, Mara froze. In the center of the clearing, half buried in the mossy earth, was a door. An old, iron-bound door, with no walls, no roof, just a door standing upright, humming with a faint, eerie light. Carved into the wood was a single word, "Enter." Behind them, the hook scraped closer. Mara hesitated before the door. The iron latch was cold and slick under her fingers, humming faintly with something that felt almost alive. Behind her, the scraping of the hook grew louder, desperate, furious. "Open it!" Joren cried, tugging her arm. Mara shoved down her fear and pulled. The world tilted. For a moment, she felt as if she were falling, tumbling through endless water. Then her feet struck solid ground, and the mist cleared. They stood in a cavern lit by thousands of tiny lights floating in the air, like fireflies made of stardust. The air smelled of salt and earth and something older, the scent of forgotten things. In the center of the cavern sat a figure. It was unlike anything Mara had ever seen, a being with shimmering blue-green skin, crowned with shells and coral. His long hair floated around him as though underwater, even though there was no water here. His eyes, deep as the ocean, fixed on Mara with an unsettling familiarity. A shokoi. Mara had only heard whispers of them, guardians of hidden knowledge, protectors of lost magic. Joren stepped back instinctively, but Mara felt rooted to the spot, drawn forward. The shokoi's voice rippled through the air, deep and sorrowful. "You carry the blood of the Forsaken," he said. Mara blinked. "What are you talking about?" The shokoi's webbed hand rose, and a ripple of memory washed over her, images she had never seen before, flashing before her eyes, her mother kneeling in a clearing, carving strange symbols into the earth. Her father, arguing with a shadowy figure under a blood-red moon. The family shack, surrounded by eyes gleaming in the dark. "You were not told the truth," the shokoi said. His voice was almost a whisper. "Your family is bound by a curse older than the forest itself. A pact made generations ago, with the aswangs." Mara staggered back. "No, my mother," she stammered. "She would never," the shokoi's gaze softened. "She fought to shield you. But blood debts are not easily forgotten. The aswangs claim what is owed." Mara clutched at her chest, struggling to breathe. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Beside her, Joren bristled. "What do they want from Mara?" The shokoi tilted his head, the lights reflecting in his unblinking eyes. "They want her life, or her service." Silence thickened between them. Then, from the folds of his coral-woven robe, the shokoi drew a small object, a pendant, gleaming with an inner light. It was shaped like a tear, a shard of moonlight caught in stone. "The mutya," he said reverently. "Forged from the tears of the Dewata. It can shield you against the darkness, if you are willing to bear its burden." He held it out to her. Mara stared at it. She should have lunged for it. She should have grabbed it, clung to it like a drowning girl to a rope. But some deep, hidden part of her recoiled. What if touching it changed her? What if it proved the curse was real, that she wasn't just poor, unlucky Mara, but something else? Something tainted? Her hands trembled. I don't want this, she whispered. You have no choice, the Shokoi said sadly. The cavern around them shuddered, and for a terrifying moment, Mara thought the world would collapse entirely. Somewhere above, she could still hear the faint, distant scraping of the hook. The aswangs hunt even now, the Shokoi warned. Your mother bought you time, but time is running thin. If you do not accept your legacy, they will tear your soul apart. Mara squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, she saw Joren's face, the fear in his eyes, and knew that she could not run forever. Not if it meant endangering those she loved. Slowly, she reached out and touched the mutya. It was warm against her skin, pulsing softly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The moment her fingers closed around it, a surge of sensation tore through her, a glimpse of another world, towering trees with faces, rivers that whispered secrets, stars that wept silver tears. And something darker. In the shadows, she saw them, the aswangs. Creatures with broken, twisted bodies and hollow, greedy eyes. They slithered through the trees, scenting the air, searching. The vision snapped away. Mara gasped, clutching the pendant to her chest. The Shokoi nodded. It has chosen you. But I don't know what to do, she cried. You will, he said. Or you will perish. The cavern trembled again, more violently this time. Cracks split the floor. The floating lights dimmed. You must go, the Shokoi urged, his voice echoing. Find the old albulario. He will teach you how to wield what sleeps inside you. But where? Mara started to ask. The ground gave way. She and Joren fell, tumbling through darkness, colder and deeper than before, until they landed hard on a bed of damp leaves. Above them, the night sky stretched endlessly, thick with storm clouds. For a moment, they just lay there, dazed. Then Mara heard it, the flapping of leathery wings. Slowly, she turned her head. Perched on the branch above them, half hidden by the darkness, was a figure. At first, she thought it was a bird. But then it shifted, and she saw the long, twisted limbs, the gleam of sharp fangs, the black eyes that seemed to drink in all the light. It smiled at her, a wet, gory smile. An aswang. Joren scrambled to his feet, pulling Mara with him. But the creature only chuckled, a sound like a blade scraping bone. And then it spoke, its voice soft and sibilant, little blood-cursed girl. We've been waiting for you. The creature's words clung to Mara like cobwebs. Little blood-cursed girl. We've been waiting for you. Before she could react, Joren tugged her backward, and they fled into the woods, the sound of laughter, cold and wrong, chasing them through the trees. Branches whipped at Mara's face and arms. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the mutya pulsing like a second heartbeat against her chest. They didn't stop until they reached the crumbling stone wall that marked the border of the old village, long abandoned, now swallowed by the forest. Mara slumped against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Her legs shook so badly she could barely stand. Joren kept watch, knife drawn, scanning the trees. They're playing with us, he muttered. Like wolves herding deer. Mara pressed her forehead against the cold stone, eyes burning. How had it come to this? A day ago, she had been worrying about mending clothes, scraping together enough food for winter. Now she was hunted, cursed, marked. She touched the mutya at her throat. Its gentle thrum was both a comfort and a burden. She couldn't run from it anymore. The blood of betrayal, of monsters, ran in her veins. Her mother had lied. Maybe not with words, but with silence. All those strange, secretive glances. The way she forbade Mara from wandering too far, the strange herbs she burned in the fireplace, the way she always locked the doors at sunset. Mama knew. Mara curled her fists until her nails bit into her palms. Part of her wanted to throw the mutya into the woods, to deny this destiny, to pretend she was just a poor girl, just Mara. But the memory of her mother's empty kitchen flashed before her, and the dark smear on the table. Whatever her mother had done, whatever sins she had carried, she had fought to protect Mara until the end. And now it was Mara's turn to fight. Even if her blood was tainted. Even if she didn't know how. Joren touched her shoulder gently. "We have to keep moving," he said. His voice was low, tight with fear he was trying hard to hide. Mara nodded, though dread weighted her limbs like iron. She followed him past the stone wall, into the ruins of the old village. It was eerily silent. Broken houses sagged under the weight of creeping vines. Wind whispered through shattered windows. Somewhere, a door swung on its hinges with a hollow creak. And then Mara saw them, small figures darting between the ruins. At first, she thought they were children. Until she saw their faces. Pale, stretched thin like wax. Black, hollow eyes. Mouths too wide, filled with jagged teeth. They didn't approach, not yet. They just watched, dozens of them, from the corners of the ruined houses, from the rooftops, from behind trees. Joren stiffened beside her. "Spirits," he whispered. "The cursed dead." Mara's skin prickled with cold. One spirit, bolder than the rest, crept closer on all fours, head twitching at an unnatural angle. It let out a low, chittering noise, almost curious. The mutya pulsed urgently against her chest. The spirit hissed and shrank back. They fear it, Mara realized. The thought gave her a small measure of courage. She clutched the pendant and took a step forward. The spirits scattered like mist, melting into the shadows. Mara sagged in relief. But the encounter left her shaken. These were minor threats, the leftover echoes of ancient evil, and yet they had nearly undone her. How could she possibly stand against real aswangs? They picked their way carefully through the ruins. Mara kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see the hook-handed creature stalking them again. But for now, the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting. They found shelter for the night in the hollowed-out remains of a stone chapel. The roof had long since collapsed, but the walls still stood, mossy and crumbling. Joren started a small, smokeless fire, and they sat in the gloom, sharing a hard loaf of bread he had scavenged from his pack. Mara nibbled at the food without appetite. Her mind whirled. What if she failed? What if she became like them, twisted, monstrous, a thing to be feared and hated? Was the darkness inside her already? She remembered how the mutya had responded to her touch, as if recognizing something ancient and powerful within her. She remembered the way the aswang had smiled at her, not with hunger, but with recognition. Blood of the forsaken. She squeezed the mutya, almost wishing it would burn her, mark her, prove once and for all which side she belonged to. But it only pulsed gently, as if waiting for her decision. "I'm scared," she said softly, surprising herself. Joren looked up. His face was bruised, weary, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. "Me too." He tossed a twig into the fire, watching the sparks drift upward. "But you're not alone, Mara. Whatever happens, I'm with you." Something twisted painfully in her chest. Joren didn't know the whole truth, not yet. He didn't know that her blood might one day betray him. That she might become the very thing he was fighting against. Could she even accept his loyalty, knowing that? Could she accept herself? The fire sputtered low. Outside, the forest moaned with the wind. Somewhere far off, a scream echoed, thin and sharp, quickly swallowed by the night. Mara shivered. She pulled her threadbare cloak tighter around her shoulders and leaned back against the cold stone wall, trying to find a moment's rest. But sleep was a fragile thing tonight. In the edges of her dreams, she wandered the forest alone. The trees were twisted, reaching for her with clawed branches. Voices whispered in her ears, calling her by forgotten names. Daughter of betrayal. Child of hunger. Sister to the night. She stumbled through the dream forest, heart pounding. And then she saw her mother. Standing at the edge of a dark river, face pale, eyes hollow. "Mama!" Mara cried, running to her. But her mother only shook her head sadly, lifting one trembling hand to point across the water. There, on the opposite bank, stood dozens of figures. Aswangs. Waiting. And at their head, Mara. A mirror image of herself, but twisted. Darker. Smiling with sharp teeth. Mara woke with a gasp, drenched in cold sweat. The fire had burned to embers. Joren slept beside her, blade still gripped loosely in his hand. Mara clutched the mutya to her chest, heart hammering. The enemy was closer than ever, not just in the shadows of the world, but inside her. Waiting. The days bled into each other, each one heavier than the last. Mara and Joren traveled deeper into the forest, following the Shokoi's final instructions, find the old albulario. But every step forward felt like wading through a storm. The forest itself seemed to resist them. Paths that were once clear twisted overnight into mazes. Whispers curled through the trees at dusk, carrying her name on the wind. Mara. The enemy was no longer hunting from the shadows. It was coming. And Mara could feel herself fraying at the edges. They camped one night at the edge of a swamp, the ground soft and treacherous beneath their feet. Heavy mist rolled over the water, swallowing sound and sight. As Joren built a fire, Mara sat apart, fingering the mutya at her throat. Its steady pulse no longer comforted her. It felt now like a warning, a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. "You're quiet," Joren said, finally breaking the silence. Mara didn't answer right away. She watched the mist slither between the trees like living things. "Maybe it would be better if you left," she said softly. Joren stiffened. "Why would you say that?" "Because I'm dangerous," she whispered. "You saw the spirits. You heard what the Shokoi said. I'm part of this, maybe more than even I know." Joren dropped the twig he was whittling. His voice was rough. "You're not like them. You don't know that." The words burst out before she could stop them. "You don't know what's inside me." Joren's mouth tightened into a thin line. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "You think I'm blind? I know you're scared. So am I. But fear doesn't make you evil, Mara." Mara shook her head. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. But when she closed her eyes, she still saw that dream, saw herself, smiling with sharp teeth from across the dark river. Sister to the night. What if the aswangs weren't just hunting her? What if they were calling her home? That night, Mara dreamed again. This time, she stood on the broken stones of an ancient altar deep within the forest. The trees pressed close, their branches forming twisted arches overhead. The sky was red with an unnatural, weeping sun. At the base of the altar stood a figure cloaked in shadows, neither man nor beast. Its face shifted and writhed, sometimes wearing her mother's face, sometimes her own. It lifted a hand and spoke in a voice that was hers and not hers. "Come, child of broken blood. Accept your birthright." The mutya burned against her skin, and she awoke with a strangled cry. Joren was at her side instantly, shaking her gently. "Mara. Wake up." She gasped, her whole body trembling. Outside their small camp, the mist thickened into strange shapes, twisting, reaching. And somewhere, beyond the mist, came the low, guttural growls of something large. The enemy was gathering. The final storm was near. The next morning, they pressed onward, exhaustion dragging at their limbs. Signs of corruption bled through the forest, trees blackened from the inside out, rivers running thick and sluggish with foul-smelling water, dead animals abandoned in grotesque positions. Once, Mara saw a deer caught in a thicket, its body twisted and half devoured, but its eyes still moved, pleading silently as they passed. She looked away, bile rising in her throat. "This is just the beginning," Joren muttered grimly. Mara knew he was right. The curse was awakening fully now, drawn by her presence, fed by her doubt. If she failed, the forest, the villages, maybe even the world beyond would fall into shadow. They found the old albulario's hut at the end of a hidden trail, half swallowed by vines and roots. The man who greeted them was ancient, bent nearly double, his skin like weathered bark. His eyes, milky with cataracts, saw straight through Mara. "You have the mutya," he rasped, beckoning them inside. The interior of the hut was cramped and heavy with the smell of burning herbs. Strange charms dangled from the ceiling, bones, feathers, twisted bits of silver. The albulario studied Mara in silence for a long time. "You are afraid," he said at last. "Good." The foolish rush to power. The wise tread carefully. Mara licked her dry lips. "Can you help me?" The old man's expression was unreadable. "Help you fight?" "Perhaps." "Help you survive?" "Maybe." He took a brittle, yellowed scroll from a shelf and spread it across a low table. Mara leaned in. The scroll showed a map of the forest, but not as it was now. It showed hidden places, lost shrines, forbidden paths. At the center of the map was a mark, a blackened tree surrounded by a ring of stones. "The heart of the forest," the albulario said. "That is where the curse was born. That is where it must end." Mara stared at the mark, heart pounding. "But beware," the old man added. "The enemy waits there. It grows stronger each night. And you are not yet whole." She flinched. "How do I become whole?" she asked, voice barely more than a whisper. The old man's gaze turned inward, as if listening to something only he could hear. "You must embrace what you are," he said. "And what you are not." Mara's stomach twisted. She didn't understand. But there was no more time. The enemy was almost upon them. As they prepared to leave, Mara caught Joren staring at her. His expression was strange, guarded. "What?" she asked. He hesitated. Then he said, "If the time comes, if you start to change, promise me you'll let me help." The unspoken words hung between them, "or stop you." Mara felt the last fragile thread of her old life snap. There was no easy way forward now. Only the narrow, blood-stained path through the heart of darkness. "I promise," she said. But deep down, she wasn't sure if it was a promise she could keep. That night, as they camped one final time before reaching the heart of the forest, the sky cracked with unnatural lightning. In the flashes, Mara saw them, figures moving at the edges of the trees, too many to count. Their shapes were wrong, shifting, crawling, flapping. Waiting. The forest no longer slept. The aswangs were coming. And Mara, cursed, broken, terrified, would have to meet them head-on. Ready or not. The heart of the forest loomed ahead. Twisted black trees surrounded the clearing like ancient sentinels, their bare branches clawing at the sky. In the center stood a massive, rotting tree, the source of the corruption, its roots thick and gnarled, pulsing like veins. Mara tightened her grip on the mutya, feeling it hum sharply in her hand. This was it. The place where everything would end, or begin again. She glanced at Joren. His face was grim but determined. Together, they stepped into the clearing. And walked straight into a trap. Figures melted out of the shadows, a dozen, maybe more. Some were twisted into monstrous shapes, skin stretched tight over bones, wings sprouting from hunched backs, eyes gleaming like coals. But some still looked almost human. And at their head stood a familiar figure. Mara's breath caught in her throat. It was the old albulario. The mentor who had sent them here. But now, in the pale, sickly light, Mara saw him clearly for the first time, his hands too long, fingers ending in sharp nails, his teeth glinting sharp and wicked in a cruel smile. "You brought her," he rasped, voice thick with triumph. "Just as I foretold." Mara staggered back, horror flooding her. Joren was already moving, pulling her behind him, blade drawn. "Run, Mara." But the circle closed around them swiftly, shadows stretching and twisting to block every path. The old man, the traitor, raised a withered hand, and the mutya at Mara's throat flared violently. Pain stabbed into her chest, making her cry out. "You bear the seed of the old blood," the albulario said, his voice rising in a chant. "The child of betrayal, of power sealed long ago. We will awaken it, and through you, we shall be reborn." Mara stumbled to her knees, clutching the mutya as if she could crush it into silence. Through the haze of pain, she realized the terrible truth: the mutya hadn't just been protection. It was a key. A lock. And the enemy hadn't wanted to destroy it, they wanted her to bring it here, to unlock the ancient curse sealed within the heart of the forest. I was never meant to fight them, Mara thought, heart pounding with dread. I was meant to free them. Joren fought desperately, carving a narrow path through the creatures. He reached Mara's side, grabbed her hand. "We have to destroy the mutya," he shouted. Mara hesitated. Destroy it? The last piece of her mother's legacy? The thing that had protected her, lied to her, her whole life? But she saw the truth in Joren's eyes. If she didn't act now, the darkness would pour from the heart of the forest and drown the world. With a sob, Mara tore the mutya from her neck. The albulario screamed a raw, inhuman sound, and lunged forward, hands outstretched. Mara slammed the mutya against a rock with all her strength. The pendant shattered with a flash of searing white light. A shockwave tore through the clearing, flinging the aswangs back. The earth itself buckled and split, the ground screaming in protest. The heart of the forest shuddered, its blackened bark cracking. The creatures howled and writhed, clutching their heads. For a moment, it seemed as if they might be defeated. But then, from the shattered remains of the mutya, something rose. Not light. Not hope. But something worse. A shape began to form, towering, terrible. A being far older and more powerful than the albulario or his twisted kin. The true curse. A queen of shadows, her form shifting and writhing, her eyes like twin black suns. Mara stumbled back, horrified. The albulario, on his knees, wept with joy. "She is awake. Our mother. Our salvation." Mara realized the mutya hadn't been a cage for the curse. It had been a cage for the queen herself. And now she was free. The queen turned her gaze on Mara. There was something almost tender in the way she regarded her, like a mother gazing at a long-lost child. "You are mine," a voice whispered in Mara's mind. "Flesh of my flesh. Blood of my blood. Come to me, and we shall unmake the world." Mara's legs buckled. Part of her, the dark, broken part, wanted to give in. To stop fighting. To finally belong. Joren grabbed her hand, anchoring her. "Mara, fight it," he shouted. "You're stronger than this." But was she? She thought of her mother, the sacrifices she had made, the fear she had lived with. She thought of Joren, the loyalty he had given freely, even when he knew she could destroy him. She thought of herself, the girl who had survived hunger, loneliness, and grief. She was not just the child of darkness. She was the child of choice. Mara gritted her teeth, forcing herself upright. "No," she said aloud, her voice trembling but fierce. "I choose who I am." The queen's smile faded into a terrible frown. The forest groaned, and the ground beneath Mara cracked, a yawning chasm opening at her feet. The queen raised a hand, and the very shadows obeyed her, rushing toward Mara like a tidal wave. Joren threw himself in front of her. The shadows struck him first. He cried out, knocked sprawling, his body shuddering. "Joren!" Mara screamed. Something inside her snapped. A flood of power, cold and bright, surged up from within her. Not the queen's power. Her own. The broken pieces of the mutya lifted into the air, swirling around Mara, weaving together into a new shape, a blade of crystal and flame. The weapon pulsed with a steady, living heartbeat, hers. Mara seized it without hesitation. She turned to face the queen, who regarded her now with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "You could have ruled," the queen hissed. "I choose to fight," Mara said. The forest roared around them. The final battle had begun. The storm of shadows tore through the clearing, howling like a living thing. Mara stood her ground. The newly forged blade in her hands burned cold and steady, a thin line of defiance against the writhing chaos around her. Across the shattered altar, the Queen of Shadows rose to her full height, a towering figure of black flame and sorrow. "You cannot kill me," the queen said, voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "I am the wound in the world. I am the hunger of your blood." Mara gritted her teeth. "I'm not here to kill you," she said. "I'm here to end you." The queen's face shifted, softening, almost mournful. "End me? But child, I am you." Images flashed through Mara's mind, her mother weeping over a cradle, whispering prayers into the night, herself as a child, hiding from voices that crept through the walls, the mutya, warm against her heart, humming a song of warning she hadn't understood until it was too late. The truth hit her like a blade to the ribs. She hadn't just been cursed. She had been made, a vessel crafted to house the queen, sealed and hidden away until the right moment. The mutya hadn't been protecting her from the world. It had been protecting the world from her. Joren stirred behind her, coughing weakly. Mara glanced back. He was alive, barely. And depending on her. On her choice. The queen stepped forward, shadows writhing around her like a living cloak. "Let go, little one," she purred. "No more loneliness. No more fear. Together, we can remake the world into something better. Stronger. Free from pain." For a heartbeat, Mara wavered. The offer was so tempting. No more nights waking up cold and afraid. No more endless hunger. No more betrayal. Just belonging. But deep inside, she knew, it wouldn't be real. It would be hollow. It would cost everything, Joren's life, the forest's life, her soul. Mara closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to herself, to the child she had been, to the mother who had tried to save her. Then she opened her eyes and raised the blade. "I'm choosing myself. Not you." The queen screamed, a sound like mountains cracking open, and the ground buckled beneath Mara's feet. The clearing twisted, warping into a nightmare realm, sky bleeding red, trees writhing into monstrous forms. The queen lunged, shadowy claws slashing toward Mara. Mara moved instinctively. The blade flashed in her hands, carving a path through the darkness. Each swing of the weapon tore holes in the queen's form, light bleeding from the wounds. But each blow also ripped at Mara's own soul, each strike a battle against the blood singing in her veins. She wasn't just fighting an enemy. She was fighting herself. The final blow came when Mara saw her mother's face shimmer across the queen's features. Not twisted or cruel. Just tired. Worn thin by years of fighting something she couldn't defeat. "You cannot kill what you love," the queen whispered with her mother's voice. Mara's hands trembled. Pain and longing roared through her, for the mother she had lost, for the life she had been denied. Could she truly destroy this final piece of her past? Would she lose herself completely? Tears blurred her vision. And then, a memory surfaced. Not one of pain. A memory of her mother laughing, tired but genuine, while patching Mara's worn cloak by the fire. A memory of hope, fragile but real. Her mother hadn't fought for death. She had fought so Mara could choose her own path. Even if it meant letting go. Especially then. Mara gripped the blade tighter. "I love you," she said, to her mother, to the part of herself that still hurt. "And because I love you, I let you go." She drove the blade into the queen's heart. The world exploded in light. The queen shrieked, a sound of despair and release, and her form crumbled into ash, carried away on a sudden, cleansing wind. The dark altar shattered. The sky cleared, soft silver starlight pouring down. The forest around them sighed, a long, shuddering breath, and began to heal. Mara collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The blade dissolved from her hands, its task complete. Joren stumbled to her side, catching her before she fell completely. "You did it," he said hoarsely, awe and relief in his eyes. Mara wanted to believe him. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The mutya had been destroyed. The queen had been defeated. And yet, in the very center of the clearing, where the queen had fallen, a small, dark seed remained, pulsing faintly with life. The curse wasn't gone. It had only changed. Before Mara could react, the ground split open once more, and from the darkness rose a new figure. Not monstrous. Not twisted. A child. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with dark hair and wide, solemn eyes. She looked so much like Mara had once looked that it made her chest ache. The child gazed at Mara, tilting her head. "You let me out," she said simply. Mara's mouth went dry. "What are you?" The girl smiled, sweet and terrible. "I'm what's left of her," she said. "And of you." She pointed a small finger at Mara's chest. "And soon, I'll be everything." Before Mara could move, the girl dissolved into mist, vanishing into the night. Joren helped Mara to her feet. "What happened?" he asked, scanning the clearing. Mara shook her head numbly. "We won," she said hollowly. "But it's not over. Not yet. Not while the seed of the queen, and the darkness inside herself, still lived." Mara looked up at the stars, feeling both smaller and stronger than she ever had before. This was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The forest was no longer a place of nightmares. Soft green shoots pushed through the ash. The trees, once gnarled and blackened, began to bloom with pale gold leaves, shimmering under the new light of dawn. Mara stood at the edge of the clearing, the broken altar behind her, the battered world ahead. The mutya was gone. The queen was gone. But the seed of darkness, the little girl, lived. Somewhere. Mara traced a hand over the scar on her chest, the place where the queen's voice had once whispered. It was quiet now. But not empty. Inside her, there was a strange, steady silence, like a locked door she would carry for the rest of her life. She would never be free of what she was. But she had chosen who she would be. And that choice mattered. Joren limped toward her, leaning heavily on a staff. His face was pale, his arm in a rough sling, but his smile was warm. "You could leave," he said gently, watching her. "Go somewhere new. Start over." Mara shook her head. The thought had tempted her in the quiet hours of the night, running far away, letting the forest heal itself, forgetting the weight of what she had done. But she knew she couldn't. This forest was part of her story, broken, cursed, and still trying to heal. Just like her. "I can't run," she said softly. "Not anymore." Joren nodded, as if he had expected it. "Then I'll stay too," he said simply. Mara blinked, caught off guard. "You don't have to," she said, voice rough with emotion. "I know," he said, his smile turning wry. "But someone's gotta make sure you don't try to fight a mountain next time without backup." She laughed, a tired, broken sound that slowly became something stronger. Real. In the days that followed, they worked side by side. The villagers, those who had survived, returned slowly, wary at first. They whispered about the curse that had lifted, about the strange girl who had faced the darkness and lived. Some looked at Mara with awe. Others with fear. Mara didn't blame them. She sometimes feared herself too. But she met their eyes without flinching, helping them rebuild their homes, replant their fields, clear away the twisted remnants of the old corruption. She didn't need their love. She only needed to keep moving forward. One evening, under a sky bleeding violet and gold, Mara and Joren sat by a small fire outside the old village. The forest murmured around them, not with menace now, but with a deep, breathing calm. Joren tossed a twig into the flames. "You think she's still out there?" he asked finally. Mara didn't need to ask who he meant. The little girl. The seed of the queen. She stared into the fire, watching the embers dance. "Yes," she said. "And you're going to find her?" Mara shook her head. "I don't think that's how it works," she said quietly. "She's part of the world now. Part of me. I can't hunt her down like an enemy." Joren frowned. "Then what?" Mara smiled faintly, a sad, fierce curve of her lips. "I'll be ready." The fire crackled between them, filling the silence. Mara thought of her mother, the burden she had carried, the sacrifices she had made. She thought of the mutya, shattered and gone. She thought of the blade she had forged, and the choice she had made. Maybe she would always carry the darkness inside her. Maybe everyone did. The important thing wasn't to destroy it. It was to live with it. To choose, every day, to be better than the things that haunted you. Later that night, alone under the vast spread of stars, Mara climbed the low hill behind the village. She knelt there in the grass, the wind threading through her hair, and whispered a prayer she didn't quite know the words for. Not for victory. Not for forgiveness. But for strength. For hope. And for the memory of the girl she had once been, scared and small, but still brave enough to dream of something more. Mara pressed a hand to the earth. "I'm still here," she whispered. The ground hummed beneath her fingers, a quiet, living answer. She stood, feeling the weight of the past settle into something she could carry. Something she could honor. Somewhere in the forest, unseen, a child's laughter echoed, high and bright and eerie. Mara turned toward the sound, her heart steady. She smiled. Not afraid. Not anymore. Final line, the darkness was hers to carry, and the light was hers to choose.